Hi, this is the Cat's Library. I'll be your librarian today. Back to another shorter video because I really need to get back into a weekly schedule with these. This is a continuation of my series where I draw an animal from reference. After the moderate success of the frog video from over a year ago, I have finally decided to draw another amphibian, that being a salamander. Engage speed paint! Apparently, salamanders are a category, not a species. Newts and mud puppies and olms and axolotls all belong to the Urudella order, which are colloquially known as salamanders. I chose to draw a California tiger salamander, which is a kind of mole salamander. Mole salamanders live most of their lives in burrows. They do not dig these burrows themselves, they live in pre-existing burrows made by other animals. Wikipedia said that California tiger salamanders used to be considered a subspecies of tiger salamander, but aren't anymore, and it didn't elaborate on this. Tiger salamanders are a subspecies of mole salamander, and California tiger salamanders are mole salamanders. That's enough of the confusing classifications. Now on to the stuff that sort of makes sense. As amphibians, they have a thin layer of skin which they get oxygen into their bloodstream through. Salamanders are a species which can regenerate limbs. California tiger salamanders typically live at higher elevations and then migrate to seasonal ponds at night, at the first major rains of fall, in order to lay their eggs. The babies grow up depending on how quickly the pond dries up. Apparently, someone recorded salamanders growing legs in 4 days. They don't really eat much, but they tend to eat small slimy things like worms and snails. It's speculated that they hibernate in the summer, which is called estivation, but scientists can't really prove that. For the drawing section, this was an easy image to adapt. Salamanders are all a fairly similar texture and don't have overly complicated anatomy at first glance. I actually had more difficult time with the grass. I made a very rough sketch for the grass and the salamander. I was sketching out the colors instead of the lines this time. I marked out some grass strands and then I made a more refined salamander sketch. I mixed it up for the next step because I blocked out the silhouette of the animal instead of moving on to line art. I adjusted the silhouette multiple times throughout the process. I think in this case it increased my speed in finishing the drawing and made the end product more realistic by lacking an outline. I made a hard shading layer and a hard highlight layer, and then added in the spots. The base was a dark brownish gray, originally anyway, I tweaked the color balance later, and the shading was dark saturated purple and the highlight was bright yellow. After the spots, I put in some soft shading layers on the same colors as the hard shading layers, but not necessarily the same opacity. I planned to only have hard shading to keep the salamander shiny, but that didn't really show the forms as well. I also added a brownish highlight layer to bring back some of that original color. One more pass at grass strands, and then I went back to the salamander. I used a bunch of different colors with a pencil brush to get a little bit of texture into the design. I drew the eye on a separate layer. I realized that the other eye had a lump that was too large and the leg on the other side of its body was too small, so I tweaked the silhouette layer. I made another highlight layer that had multiple colors but was comprised of solid shapes because it wasn't looking exactly like the reference yet, and I was having trouble showing the forms of a mostly single-colored creature, and so I basically circled around the form so that people could see it. I played around with the layers that I had until they looked right. After that, I moved on to the leaves and the grass and the dirt. As the background changed, I mildly tweaked the salamander to compensate, including adding yet another highlight layer that was white and understated. Story time! Salamanders have a connection with fire, which was showcased as a character in Frozen 2 and as the emblem of the firemen in Fahrenheit 451. It is speculated that this is because people would burn a rotten log and a bunch of salamanders would run out. This was in the human zeitgeist as early as ancient Persia. Persian royalty sometimes had cloth that was fireproof and said to be made out of salamander skin, but was probably just asbestos. You ever hear the one about the salamander on the sun? There was an astronomer who looked through a telescope and saw some sort of monster on the sun. The astronomer did the calculations and found that the creature was enormous. He could see that anyway. It had multiple limbs and wings, but the capacity to withstand fire like a salamander. He tried to report this to some fellow astronomers and they came over and also witnessed the sight. However, one of them decided to look over the telescope and found a fly on the lens. Yeah, that's barely a salamander story. I'm not sure if I could find something better though. That should be it for today. I'm probably going to knock out a few more episodes in this series before moving on to something more complicated. Next episode should be the tortoise. I'll see you when I see you. Bye!